I kind of left with a goal that like I wanted to do some research at the very least on how to like make like an arts foundation or nonprofit that could like partner with different galleries. And moving back from 2024 to 2025, a year went by and I did not make any progress. And I was like kind of stopped in my tracks by that because again, I'm very goal oriented. This was something that was important to me. And I really had to like the realization at that moment that I had been like so caught up in work and trying to make things happen at my job that it, like distracted me and taken all of my energy away from the things that were important to me in my personal life.
Welcome to In Her Words. This podcast is for women navigating through change, career, identity, motherhood, and just figuring out what's next. I'm Roberta Dombrowski, host of In Her Words and founder of Learn Mindfully. Each episode, I sit down with women who are asking big questions, navigating transitions, and trying to make sense of life as it shifts. You don't have to have it all figured out. You just need space to be real. Let's get into it. Welcome. Today, I am speaking with Victoria Montgomery. She is a transition coach at Voice Nerve Motion LLC. She's a human-centered professional with experience across mission-focused sectors with a passion for helping individuals and teams realize their full potential through developing a healthy relationship with their power and owning who are they becoming. Welcome, Victoria.
Hi, Roberta. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to have you on the podcast today. We met probably like half a year ago at this point, which is wild, through an entrepreneurship group coaching program. I was wondering if you could give listeners a little bit about your journey and what led you to this moment.
Yeah, it was a little bit of a windy road. So I started 2025. Wow, because now in 2026. So I started 2025 realizing that I had kind of like stalled on some of my goals around creativity. And I really couldn't put my finger on like why that was. I'm a very goal-oriented person and I just had not made any progress on my creative goals in particular. So I started the year off actually doing a little bit of a shadow work for your creativity course. And that unlocked the key. So, from there, I really just started being just more intentional with myself and how I was spending my time. And that did include writing for creativity, making sure I'm spending time prioritizing like time to be inspired. And actually, on my 34th birthday in April, I went to an art show. And the year prior, I went to the same art show. There was a gallery there from New York that's Black owned, and they had the same booth spot, like right when you first walk in. And the year prior, I met with the gallery owner and just kind of like was talking to him about how he got started and any programs that they do like in the community. And I kind of left with a goal that like I wanted to do some research at the very least on how to like make like an arts foundation or nonprofit that could like partner with different galleries. And moving back from 2024 to 2025, a year went by and I did not make any progress. And I was like kind of stopped in my tracks by that because again, I'm very goal oriented. This was something that was important to me. And I really had to like the realization at that moment that I had been like so caught up in work and trying to make things happen at my job that it, like distracted me and taken all of my energy away from the things that were important to me in my personal life, especially after now I've like unlocked my creativity, so to speak. So that was in April. And I think from April, our cohort started in July. So in
Yeah,
that
yeah.
time, I was still like, I had come into deeper understanding and a deeper reckoning with where I was with work and knowing that I needed a little bit more structured help. And so that's when I had started talking to Vivian more and seeing more of her LinkedIn posts. And they were like kind of really hitting the nail on the head about like where I was, what I wanted, what I needed. And that's what brought me to our cohort. So to answer it more succinctly, it was both the desire for creativity and the grief of time passing, feeling like my life is kind of passing me away, that I'm not focused on the things that really matter to me. And I've been giving away my time and energy to these things that like are kind of serving me, but not really.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You mentioned creativity, and I'm curious, is that like a theme or something that you've honored for a long time in your life?
It's something that's always been important to me. Like many little kids, I grew up wanting to be an artist. I would draw a lot. It was something that was supported and nurtured to a degree, but of course, like many people, your parents tell you that you're not gonna make any money if you
Yep.
can be an artist, which is also, I feel like, pretty ironic because now we're in such a different place with art as a society and like the power of social media. So something that kind of got put on the back burner around the time I was 10, 11. And I would say when I was in college, I started playing in makeup and that became my new like creative outlet. And I wouldn't like say I was artistic at that time. I'm like, but creative. And that was
Yeah.
my way of like, feeling that need. But then I would like look at things that other people could do. And even my younger sister, only in the time of the pandemic, she started getting like really creative and artistic with these paintings and these drawings. She's amazing. And she did that in such a small amount of time that and she would just say, like, I just took the time to do it. And that made me realize that like I'm just not making this a priority. And again, like that was again in 2020. And like that's still a conversation that's kind of like been going on. And I would even like by myself paint, acrylic paint, the paintbrushes, the canvas. But I really had a goal of like once a month. And like again, some months I would, or maybe like the first couple months I would, but then it would like really fall off. And I again going back to like, what led me to that shadow work course, like I've been wanting to do this. It's been important to me. I used to do it, but I'm not sticking with it. And again, that's just not like me to not adhere to something that I say that I value.
I love the honesty of investigating that because what you're talking about, it's like it's a values, and I think a lot of the time people can have like aspirational values. They say that they care about something, and then when it comes to like the day-to-day decisions of whether they make space for it, they don't. And it's very rare that people investigate it. They're like, wait a minute. I said last year I want to do this thing. I didn't do this thing. Now I'm going to do this thing. It takes a lot of courage to confront that.
Absolutely. It does. And I think I was the only child for a long time. I'm 7 years older than my next sister, and I'm 9 years older than the sister that I'm talking about.
Wow.
Yeah. So I spent a lot of time being an only child. And even after having siblings, like they were so much younger than me that like they weren't really like a true connection,
Yeah.
right? And even the one that's 7 years younger than me too, she's also a very talented artist. So it's kind of like these babies that come in here is still in my dream. But really, I just wasn't doing what I needed to do, and I wasn't understanding why. But I think because I spent so much time as an only child, I was used to kind of like going within, and maybe I reach out to my parents for like a bit for connection. Maybe they kind of understand what I mean and entertain it with me. Maybe they're too busy and they can't. So I grew up growing myself really to go deeper, to ask more questions, and you can probably relate with the time that we grew up, where if like you had a question you're always told to go, like, look it up, and back when there was no Google, you had to go get the encyclopedia. So being, groomed in that way as a child too is just kinda like, okay, and especially now with it being so easy with the internet at the tips of our fingers, it's like, okay, let's investigate, let's see what's going on, what else may be happening here?
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. You talked a little bit about how you had gotten away in that year away from the dream of pursuing creativity and art. And I'm curious, what happened in that year? Was it just you went into work? Did something happen at work?
Yeah, so I got a new job, and it was a job that I really liked, really wanted, really valued. And I think because I both enjoyed and valued the job so much, and, of course, we get into certain mindsets about like not necessarily proving our worth, but proving value, perhaps along those lines. And there was a work that needed to be done, but it I felt very confidently that it could be done. I think I spent a lot of time trying to establish myself and kind of help my function become more well developed. But in my dedication to my own definition of excellence and in the skills and gifts that I brought to the role, I think that ended up being, I hesitate to use the word, but I think it is the right word, threatening to some people who I worked closely with. And so when I would have ideas or like, try to move things forward, it would be met with avoidance for a while, and then I'll have to spend time trying to understand and unpack, like, what is this avoidance about, especially if, like, we're all feeling the burden of the work and I'm coming with the solution. So, like, I internalized that first. Like, okay, if their need is here, we all feel it, and I'm coming with the solution. What's in the solution, as far as I can see, fits and works. Why are we not moving forward with it? And of course, I have like speculation about that. I think, and I do want to be empathetic and show some grace here too. I think it can be hard to be a female leader, to be responsible for making decisions, and to feel like all eyes are on you, or, even if somebody else has this idea and it otherwise seems fit, like if it goes wrong, I'm the person that ultimately,
Yeah.
bears or carries the cross for that. So I think there's some tricky emotional realities that are valid there. But again, I think I was getting too caught up in that beyond what was fair or appropriate for me.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Did you have a time in that year that you were like, this is not working for me? Corporate is not where it's at anymore.
Shortly after that, I think around the time that my birthday hit, I think maybe like, actually, it was April 14th. I had been, my birthday's April 25th. This was April 14th. Um,
Taurus?
yes, I am a
Okay.
Taurus.
Okay.
And I been, just journaling and praying. It was on a Sunday morning. And I just was like feeling stuck. I think at this point, I kind of come to like a reckoning that like this really isn't working, but I wasn't really ready to give myself permission to
Mm,
leave. I'm just like, okay, like how can I make this work? Like what else can I try? And on April 14th, I prayed and journaled, I had my church time. And I heard just loud and clear, like, you need to quit, like you need to leave the role.
mm.
Like, in this economy? And it's so funny because later on, I was telling my mom about this. She's like, "You questioned God?" I'm like, "Yes, I did." He knows that that was gonna sound crazy to me. And then I turned on, this was a bedside Baptist day for me. So I turned on church, and the word that day was about having the faith, like you need to trust God to be able to take a leap without knowing what's coming next. And that's a part of being able to trust and walk on that path. And the timing of it was just very striking to me. And again, I didn't end up leaving till nearly 6 months later, because at that point, it's like, okay, well, I felt this way. I've gotten kind of like this confirmation. Don't let me do it too soon. Order my steps, order my
Yeah, yeah.
words.
You
Like,
wanted a plan, it sounds like.
dude, because the economy is crazy. I'm not one to leave
Yeah.
having something lined up, which is what ended up happening. But yeah, that was the exact moment where I was like, yeah, but I think before then, the fact that I felt like when I went home, I felt like a stick. Have you ever seen those memes where like it's like the stick figure and like the head is huge with like a swirl all over?
Yes.
That's what I felt. And I somewhere in between like feeling that way and trying to like advocate and ask for help, and it kind of falling on deaf ears. Those were some like the other symptoms that, okay, I'm feeling this way, I'm vocalizing it, I'm not being met with the support that I need for this to be different. Like that at that point, it's kind of tough on options.
Yeah, and it sounds like from what you're talking about, it started almost as like a spark, a knowing, and then you knew, but then there was almost like this phase of still trying to make it work. Or like what I noticed with clients is like they want to know that they did all that they could within their control before they're ready to hang it up and like transition. And it sounds like maybe you had a few months after that, the first knowing that you were like, no, I'm gonna try, we're gonna see, and then it just didn't work anymore.
Yeah, and another point that ended up being ironic but telling was at the end of 2024, I had started funded through my employer, a coaching engagement, which I loved and enjoyed. So I got the paperwork rolling at the end of 2024. We got started at the start of 2025. And I had like my set of like my list of goals and things I wanted to focus on that were genuinely just like kind of what I wanted to focus on to get me to like, my next level. But I noticed increasingly that every time we would meet, we couldn't really get to everything on the list because I really needed help navigating what I was experiencing in real time. That was a pretty big tell for me.
That makes sense. Was entrepreneurship always in the cards for you? How did you go from leaving corporate to then jumping into this new thing?
I am a Taurus. I like stability. I like security. I like knowing that the check is coming every two.
Yeah. What did we say? I remember we were on a call, you and me, and you were like, I'm not meant to live an uncomfortable life. I was like, yeah, me too.
Yes, and so people talk about like how difficult and rewarding, but difficult
Yeah.
entrepreneurship can be, and how, it sometimes gets a little bit glamorized, or people are dismissive about the true benefits and the cost and weight and value of the benefits that you do get from working a traditional 9 to 5. So though I did want to start something on my own on the side, I was never planning to like jump head and feet first
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
an entrepreneurial endeavor. But sometimes life and God have other plans, and you just gotta buckle up for the ride.
Yeah, yeah. No, I relate to that. That's how I started Learn Mindfully was a few years ago. I got laid off from a coaching job and I was like, screw this, I still want to do it. And that's how it was founded. I think it's interesting when you jump in like that because the group program with Vivian was the first time that I really like slowed down and I was like, wait, what's the big vision? Because I had just gone into like reactive mode with the business. And so like actually took the time to slow down of like, what's the big vision? Like, what's my decades long plan for this business versus just experimenting all the time? And so I'm curious, you want to tell us a little bit about what your venture is?
Yes. So I previously worked in nonprofit higher education, and through all of my roles, I always coaching and mentoring, but really coaching was also always a part of the work. And even in my role in talent acquisition as a recruiter, I really appreciated and enjoyed the process of like building trust and making my hiring managers feel understood, and making them connect to the idea that like you're in the right hands, we can get what's needed done. And when that trust was established, then they would come to me and ask for other questions or support. They're going to help them be successful in how they navigate the process, even like with internal candidates, like having like perhaps difficult conversations, supportive conversations. When, launching a coaching business or a business, I wanted to like lean into my gifts. And so with my coaching business, I'm here to support people who are really looking to they've realized that they've outgrown something in how they navigate, something in how they operate, they navigate their boundaries. Something is just like not really fitting or working anymore. And I want to help them, because a lot of times people do actually know what it is. But I want to help them figure out their style and language for
Mm.
kind of putting things back where they go and having their life feel good again. Because again, as we kind of talked about, I know what it's like to have something be out of whack or taking energy inappropriately. And it takes a lot of effort and energy to take that inventory and then start, like, that's overwhelming as it is, but then you start making steps to get things back where they go. And so I want people to be able to feel like they can envision and embody their big picture view of success. I'm meeting people at that place where something isn't fitting anymore, it's not working for them, like a change either has been made and they're struggling to catch up to it, which happens, or they need to make a change so that things can be in flow.
Yeah, they know something's wrong, something's not working for them. Yeah. It's interesting because we talked a little bit about it with your own journey, but what I find is that we as humans try so much to control, like something's not working. And so we try to usually overpower and fix it. Like, oh, I can make it work. I can just give more energy and all that. And it's like, no, sometimes it's just discernment and walking away or
It's kind of just like you fix it by letting go. Observe what happens first and figure out what we want to do next.
yes, exactly, exactly. I'm curious with the folks that you work with, is there a particular like audience? Are you working with leaders, individual contributors?
Yeah, so people who view themselves as leaders regardless of their title or status. And I actually, one of my first clients has actually been a man, and that's was not necessarily on my bingo card, but it has worked out well. And so I'm
Nice.
happy. I had this in mind for women, and specifically women of color, just because the things that we navigate can just
Yeah.
feel a little bit more tricky or have a little bit more weight to them. Some people are individual contributors, some people are in leadership and either wanting to like grow in their leadership, or they're wanting to fine tune their leadership practices. And like I haven't put in any of my copy or anything like that yet. I haven't figured out like a way to say this without it turning people off perhaps, but I do have a conviction about like insecure leadership kind of corrupting credibility. And of course, if you're going to be a leader, you need to maintain your credibility. That's like one of the most important things. So people are at various stages, but everybody does see themselves as a leader.
Yep, yep, yep. Can you talk more about the insecure leadership and credibility? I'm curious. I can tell there's a lot of meat there.
There is, and I do want to be transparent, just because I think it is easy to kind of be like on a high horse once you feel like you figured out a couple of things, or once you've been on the opposite side of a couple of things. But, starting out when I was like 26, 25, 26, I was working in higher education. I had a staff, and really my first two staffs, they could not stand me. I think that's important to say. Like I've actually gained this experience, like I've studied it from the textbook, and I've also like learned firsthand. And a lot of it is just kind of understanding how to communicate when there is a power difference. And a lot of it is about accountability too. And I would say for me, there were some situations as life presents, there were some elements of the situation that really didn't have a lot to do with me or that were out of my control, but there were some that were within my control and within my sphere of influence. And I had to learn to like really slow down and be more intentional with how I spoke and how I made people feel in moments that could be perceived as vulnerable. So I think one that stands out was like in maybe my first or second start of the year training. And again, I was working in higher education. And one of the like wind down activities that we did, like, was a reflection that we did as a group. And people, like, I was a facilitator actually, and I asked, it was like a step forward or raise your hand type of a thing, like if you learned something new. And I didn't acknowledge that I learned something new. And I think it was probably a little bit of, I don't want to say imposter syndrome, but like perhaps like of like, I'm the leader, I'm the expert, I'm teaching you. And like from a content standpoint, I did know those things, but I didn't acknowledge, and maybe I should have even specified in the question that like, I learned a lot about the staff though, but I didn't acknowledge it at all. And I think that that really turned people off early on. So like really learning and leaning into like the emotional intelligence again, especially when there's that power difference, because I'm sure that was, like, really annoying for those staff and those student leaders that were supposed to be or expected to look up to me, and I can't acknowledge that I learned something new. And I think that ego can get in the way a lot when leaders are trying and figuring it out or just wanting to feel good about themselves, whether they're trying to or not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so just remembering that, like, you it's hard to be a leader if there's no one else around, like, you can't be the only person or only perspective in the room, and so, again, apologizing or being able to take accountability is big. I know that that's one that I felt frustrated with other people in my career. It's like, if you're not safe to say that you made a mistake, it just doesn't set a good tone, and then even if I'm, like, the more subordinate person, if I'm able to do that, say, like, "Hey, I'm sorry about that," or, if I'm bringing it to your attention before anything bad happens, like, "Hey, before anything happens with this, I made this misstep. Here's what I'm doing about it. What are your thoughts?" And, like, that's appreciated, but you still can't, like, mirror it back when, like, you did make a mistake.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the biggest the I always say, like, the biggest risk to so many businesses is ego. Because ego is what we're seeing on a daily basis on the news, on everything. It's people not being able to admit that they're wrong, not being able to take accountability, humility. It's the lack of self-awareness. There's so much there. Completely agree with you. And what I think is interesting through the thread throughout everything that you have said so far is it's like the self-awareness and empathy that you have. And just knowing that like you don't have all the answers, being able to verbalize that as a leader and say like I want to find out more.
Yeah, I think curiosity is so powerful and it's such an underutilized tool. And I want to be mindful. I do understand that like when you're pressed on a timeline, sometimes you don't have a lot of
Yeah.
time to be curious. But even if like
Yeah.
you can't be curious in the moment, I think it's still worth it to circle back. In like this process, I've met with another woman who has a lot of experience as like a formal facilitator. And I was meeting with her and we were just talking about like a lot of the things that come up in these corporate workspaces, especially like she's a lot of times coming in as an outsider. I've done a lot of like internal facilitation, but I'm preparing to lean into doing some where I'm coming in from outside. And we kind of talked about like when you can tell the difference in like how the functional organization operates when the leader is s emotionally intelligent, which also should suggest that they've done their own self-work, and I don't think it was, like it came up explicitly in the conversation, but we kinda danced around it, and, like, later on, I saw, like, a TikTok or something that talked about when you're so used to lying to yourself, which is a lot of times a space that we fall into when we haven't tended to ourself and our self-work, it becomes so natural to then kind of be lying to everybody else, and you can more or less tell when that's the vibe, at least in a leader and hopefully not in the team, but of course, sometimes it is a little bit of a trickle down effect.
It's like performative leadership, yeah. I was talking to someone earlier today, and we were saying, like, as a leader or as a coach or even as a therapist, you can't take people to the same level, the same depths that you have not been to yourself.
Yeah,
And so,
that's a really good insight. Yeah.
yeah. In some of your work, you talk about aligning effort versus force. And we talked a little bit about kind of control, but I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit about what does that mean to you?
Yeah, one of the things that actually really attracted me to my last organization and gave me a lot of clarity in how I operate personally and professionally was the idea of values alignment and just how important that is. And even, as if you have friends or other relationships that you've carried with you for like a while, and at a certain point, or the certain things that you tend to like have that friction around, or the things that you pump heads around. Before I would get like upset and maybe make it it is kinda personal, but, like, more personal than maybe what it needed to be versus just, like, zooming out and remembering we just have different values on this topic, and that would just end up being, like, a really healthy reframe for me to navigate relationships. But also, again, if I'm, like, scoping out a new opportunity or even how to have a conversation, like, let's say, like, within context of my last role or opportunity, how can I reach across the table on the common ground of our values? Like, we both value getting the work done, we value our reputation, we wanna be seen as the subject matter experts. Like, how can we leverage those points of connection around, like, what we both genuinely value or what genuinely matters to us in these moments? And I think where I was getting lost at to some degree is like sometimes even if you know that there are those values aligned topics, if you're or if I was spending too much time just kind of like not paying attention to like where the misalignment really was. Now I'm like trying to force something that really is never going to be successful or kind of come together or congeal in the way that it needs to for this to be successful because the misalignment is actually not being addressed. There's no movement around the parts that actually do not align.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's such powerful discernment to be able to one identify where you have values alignment within an organization or to a role or whatever it might be in a relationship. And then also when it's not there too. And then what is the impact of that energetically, somatically? Because usually if there's a misalignment, it's usually going to manifest in some way. It's usually going to be energetically or like a lot of burnout happens that way and it becomes heavy.
It does, and I'm glad you even brought up somatically because in the 2025, I like and of course, I'm pretty sure it was a function of the misalignment that was there. I did start having, like, a lot more somatic and physical symptoms, and you mentioned a feeling of, like, heaviness, and in April, I would still say I just felt perpetually exhausted, and all year long for the most part, like, unless my friends made a plan with me, I would show up for the plan, but, it's winter, I live in Chicago, so it's pretty cold. And I would basically spend, like, from January through April, I was spending every weekend just sleeping, and I would still be so exhausted. And then by the time we got to April, I found myself in, like, what's called, like, a functional freeze where you're
Yeah.
still, like, yeah, like, moving through your day as you normally would, but, like, you are completely emotionally numb and detached and just feeling extremely disconnected, and I looked up, and I think 2 or 3 weeks had gone by, and I was like, "Whoa, we're at that date already? Like, how did that happen?" And that was, like, a really big tell, a really big red flag for me.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I love that you're using this language. I actually use it as well with my therapist because, well, I guess zooming back out, when we go through stress, our nervous system will react in different ways. Usually what we see is fight, flight, freeze. fight. It's that really intense thing. We got to survival. Freeze is when or even fawning, we're just kind of numb. We numb out. Maybe that's like you're vegging out on the couch. You're existing, but you're not really connecting. One of the things that I've realized within my own pattern is functional freeze as well. And it was last year, the end of last year, I was talking to my therapist and I was like, I feel motivated again. Like, oh my God, I need to do something with this energy. She was like, yeah, like, let's go. And I ended up applying to grad school, which I'm now starting at the end of this month. But I think it's being aware of like, if your body is in that state, it's really paying attention to your nervous system. Like, do you notice a few days in a row that you're kind of lying on the couch, or maybe you're aggravated or like amped up for multiple days? And just asking yourself, like, hey, what's happening here? Like, is this a pattern that I'm in? What do I need right now in order to shift out of it? And usually with functional freeze is that we're feeling a lot and typically overwhelmed with the feeling or not letting ourselves process the feeling because we're not moving forward through the emotions. We're kind of like sitting in it. We're frozen in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, I started to feel like a lot of like fear and doubt, and I really couldn't place where it was coming from. That's just not like me. It's not like me to feel that way at work. Like it was just like I try to make a really like stronger, coherent relationship with my personal power. And I think leading up to this point, because I was bringing stuff up and it really wasn't being attuned to in the way that I needed it to be, I it almost felt like I needed to start like fawning or just being like, okay, or just kind of like moving along or not making peace. I'm a Black woman, not trying to be a troublemaker. And then also around this time, as you could probably already tell, I spent a little too much time on TikTok on TikTok. This is also a clip from a podcast that I do watch too. I'm not sure if you watch or are familiar with the Diary of a CEO, but I forgot who the expert was. But basically, they were talking about there's an experiment done where they had two groups of participants. In one group, both of them used sweat. Like, so one of them, the people just like worked out and that's how they got sweat on their clothes. And then the other group did skydiving. And so they had sweat from like nerves. But when other participants smelled the clothes, the people who just smelled the workout sweaty clothes, they were fine. They didn't really like notice anything. But the people who smelled the fear-induced sweat, they became fearful. And it was kind of illustrating the conversation, and I'm assuming the study too, were illustrating that fear can be contagious. And although I previously had not felt this way, I didn't know that people on my team or in my organization had felt a lot of anxiety and very fearful. And again, I can't exactly put my finger on like why that is, but I remember even
System.
Yeah.
System.
Yes, I guess we can put our finger on why that
Yes,
is.
yes.
But yes.
Systemically, something was going on. Yes.
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 And I remember talking to my therapist about it and I even was like, I just feel like I need to like shake this off. And he was like, it's so interesting that you even say that because he was reading this book called Awakening the Tiger, Healing Trauma, which I also ordered the copy. I haven't read it yet, but it talked about like trauma, like basically like the animal kingdom. I'm assuming it ties back to people too, but how animals like will literally like shake
it to
Yeah.
discharge it. Yeah.
And for me, my strategy at that time, I'm still, in this environment trying to navigate, is at the start of the year, and I think by the summertime, I started to record it just because like if I need it, somebody else needs it. But I would just like go online on Pinterest or wherever else, Twitter, whatever like affirming, like mindset resetting quote, mantra, whatever the case, I would go find it and I would just like read over them, or I'd go on Pinterest and I'd like, have like images and boards that just like were really positive and really affirming. And sometimes again, sometimes just images. And I would just spend time at the end of every day, just kind of like focused on that. And that also helped me not get lost in the emotion of everything that I was feeling and navigating. And at that time, I did kind of feel like torn in between like two realities. Like I felt like a lot of pressure to shrink to fit the one I was in at work. I was using that little routine or ritual at the end of the day to kind of keep my mind and body focused on like, but
self-care and having hope. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
and moving forward and continuing to be empowered and comfortable to take up space and knowing that my ideas are good and, all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. You are putting such powerful words to being in an environment that is no longer like suited for you. And how do you continue with hope and coping and everything? I'm curious, what does the future hold for you now that you've stepped away from that space?
That's a big and beautiful question. Thank you for asking. And it's a challenge to say just because of where I'm at. Like, I do feel very grounded in myself, and I know the action steps I'm taking and continuing to move towards. And while I'm still moving, I trust that the reality around me will take shape, but I don't think it has done that just yet. So some of my big goals for this year are to. So last year when I went to the shadow work course, I started writing on Substack. And so I want to continue to write for myself privately. I do want to make a few pitches to public publications for this year. I would love to do some facilitating and like group coaching work like in the corporate sphere. And of course, continue to grow with the individual clients as well. So again, I just want to be able to help everybody move towards their most empowered, big vision, big picture vision of their success versions of themselves, whether it's like, teamwork focused, individual, and just, continue to fight the good fight.
I love it. We started this conversation talking about creativity. And so I'm curious, as we're in the new year, are there any creative practices that you're embracing this year?
That's such a good question and you just challenged me to be more specific. So one of the things I appreciate about starting this year is we'll see if I'm right or wrong, but I feel like I'm on my marks from where I was last year. My resolutions, if you will, are about just continuing and making more structures to continue and deepen the work that I'm already been doing. So it is important for me. So like last year, one of my goals was to have weekly intentional fun. And this year it's like bi-weekly, so I'm up in the ante. And a lot of times my idea of fun, it has to do with something that's inspiring. So this time I lean more into like inspirational fun. And so like last week I ended up going like wheel throwing, which is, like ceramics pottery.
Yeah.
So we did that. That was fun. One of my favorite things to do, there's a studio in Chicago that does graffiti art. And so like with like the spray paints, I love that. So just making sure that I'm keeping it top of mind. And, in certain months like February, for instance, I don't know about this year, but last year there were a lot of like Black History Month installations. So it can be things like that. But even still, like last year, there was an exhibit called Project the Black Planet, which I absolutely loved. And I bought the art book. And so though I can't always go see that exhibit, I at least have the book. I'm making it intentional to like invest more in those practices or those states of mind that hold meaning, hold impact, and are still like inspirational and get me thinking about being creative as well.
Yeah. I love the examples that you gave too, because they're very tactile. So like the wheel throwing, the pottery, all of those things are very tactile. Even the art exhibits that you're talking about, which is important. All of those things, I feel like we kind of, at least with 2020, we kind of disconnected from the physical. And so it's nice to see that you're embracing that in your practice.
It is so easy to get lost in like the responsibility of life. As much as I can, I try to keep it a priority to do something very intentional, like you said, tactile or tangible, so that I'm just like getting the most out of that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Amazing. How can listeners stay in touch with you?
Yes, so by the time this airs, my website should be ready. So it'll be voicenervemotion.com. And otherwise, people can find me on LinkedIn, Victoria Montgomery. Like if you do the URL.
We'll have the URL in the show notes.
And then I am on TikTok under Toria Taught Me.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Victoria, for joining us.
Thank you, Roberta. I loved being a guest on your podcast. I really appreciated it.
Thanks for being here. If something in this episode landed with you, feel free to pass it along to someone who might need it too. You can leave a review, subscribe, or just keep tuning in. We're figuring it out together. And remember, your story, your voice, your becoming, it all matters.